The year was 2003. Matrix was reloaded, Bill Murray was lost in translation, The Strokes set the room on fire, and Radiohead became prophetic in the album Hail to the Thief. Also, Roland unveiled a massively cool synthesizer called the V-Synth. I'm Roland V-Synth, and this is Alamo Music Center, San Antonio, Texas. Be sure to check us out online at alamomusic.com, hop on the YouTube channel Alamo Music Sound Lab, and subscribe. There's a lot of great videos coming up soon from awesome synthesizers, classic samplers, drum machines, and a whole lot more. What makes this Roland V-Synth so special? Well, there's actually a lot. There's a lot going on under the hood. There's lots of ways to manipulate everything that's inside the synthesizer. For example, there's your standard 2 oscillators, but those oscillators can have a lot of different variety. For example, let's take oscillator 1. You could choose your standard sawtooth, triangle, saw, sine wave, but you could also load in things like, say for example, your own user samples, or choose from any PCM-based waveform that's built into it, and there's a lot of them. I should say that the standard stuff, for example, the Super Saw, the Juno, oscillator, the sawtooth, the pulse, those are all analog modeled. So this was kind of like a very strong synthesizer for Roland, kind of delving into that analog modeling thing that was going on back in the era. Speaking of this particular look, or the era rather, this keyboard was made in 2003, and as you can tell from the top panel, it kind of looks like it. It's got a dated look to it. But I hope that doesn't put anybody off, because once you get past the actual physical look of it, it gets to be a very deep synthesizer. And I think once you get into the heart of it, you really get to hear what makes it so special. As I said, you could import your own wave files into this, which is pretty awesome, because you could route that wave file along with, say for example, the analog modeled sawtooth wave, and modify it real time via the trip pad or the D-beam as well. The D-beam can be assigned to any different parameter. For example, you can have pitch or time, or you have assignable, which could be, for example, filter or reverb or envelope or LFO. Lots of different things that can be done via the whole the D-beam or the trip pad. There's a great arpeggio section built into it, and there's also kind of a sort of sequencer built into it, which is, to me, a little difficult to get through, but for the most part, I found the arpeggiator worked really well, and it was very musical at that. The filter section on here is really outstanding, because you could have your basic filter with your 24 dB, low pass filter, resonance attached to it. You can have dual filters going at the same time, both low pass. There's a TB303 emulated filter built into it, which sounds pretty cool. But there's also ways to route the oscillator through an effects processor built in. So for example, if you choose to not use a filter on an oscillator, you can have it running through an amp simulator, a speaker simulator, an overdrive, a comb filter, and all of those things make this thing extremely powerful, because again, one oscillator can be doing the standard synth thing, and the other oscillator can be doing something completely wild. On top of that, as mentioned before, loading in your own samples, whether it's a drum loop, a vocal sample, or a regular sample from an analog synthesizer, can really yield unlimited potential to anything you'd like to get achieved on this synthesizer. The key bed is top-notch. It feels really good, your typical Roland professional key bed, which also serves fantastically as a USB controller. And you still have your standard effects section like your reverbs, your delays, chorus and flanger, which are good, but most of the time I find myself turning off the reverb and the delays and using outboard stuff like an Evitide or a Strymon effects processor. As I'm sure that you know by now, effects of the early 2000 era were good, but they weren't phenomenal. So I would say that would be the Achilles heel of the Roland V-Synth, is that reverb and delay processor. Definitely doable on stage or even in the studio, but you could definitely carve out something better with better processors. Okay, so the back panel of the synthesizer is pretty well featured. You have your standard MIDI stuff, MIDI in, out, and through. You've got 3 pedal switches, jacks rather, which are the hold, sustain. And you have 2 other controllers that can be assigned to other parameters inside the synthesizer, like volume and filter and stuff like that. You do have left and right input on the back panel, which is pretty phenomenal. So you can actually route the input structure through the filters and use it as a secondary oscillator. That's pretty awesome. You've got your direct outs, and you also have your main outputs. On this side, you've got digital I/O, you've got ADAT optical, and you've got coaxial. You also have USB port, which is super essential for loading in your own samples. I've often hooked it up to the USB port on my computer and transferred vocal samples into it, ran that vocal sample through a filter, through some effects, and then used the TimeTrip Pad to manipulate the vocals real time. If you've never heard that or done that and have one of these, you should definitely do that, because vocals with this make something outstanding happen. You also have a PCM-CIA card slot on the back. And while that's kind of an archaic type of way of storing stuff, it gives you the ability to load in new engines into the V-Synth. Roland made 2 PCM-CIA cards that had engines loaded on them. One of them was the D50 card, which emulated a Roland D50. And I've tried that card, and it's a good approximation of what a D50 would be, but to me it's not really like a true D50. But the belle of the ball with these cards is the Vocal Designer card. That is the one to get, because when you load in that card and convert the engine from what it is right now into a vocal engine, now you can have massive sounding vocoder sections. And you also get some vocal stuff that sounds unlike any vocoder, but sounds really lush and thick and rich. So obviously, if you play a couple chords on the key bed and sing through a microphone with the Vocal Designer card loaded, you get some pretty angelic things going on and some pretty demonic things going on. It can get pretty cool pretty fast with that card. Those cards have kind of gotten really expensive on the used gear market, but if you find one out there at a good price and you have a V-Synth, you should definitely check that card out. It should be said that the Roland V-Synth to me is a very soundtracky kind of synthesizer. A lot of the textures and tones I've kind of created with this synthesizer have yielded some really amazing results that I've never been able to do just about anywhere, including DAWs and with VSTs. It's still a very powerful and valid synthesizer, and it still yields things that really nothing else can do. So all in all, I still think that this keyboard holds tremendous value out there. It's just gotten lost by the wayside. People have kind of overlooked it or passed it off as an early 2000s rompler or something like that, which really it isn't. If you really hone in on it and really allow it to give you some great things, I think you'll be very satisfied with this engine in this keyboard. It's just truly a gem. Well, enough talk about this synthesizer that time forgot. Let's check it out and hear it. I'd like to add that this particular V-Synth belonged to a very good friend of ours, David Winter, who passed away way too early at the height of COVID. So a lot of the sounds you heard tonight were from his particular sound sculpting. Some of them were my presets, and some of them were the factory presets. In any case, it was a real joy to play his synthesizer and showcase his favorite synthesizer, this particular Roland V-Synth. Rest in peace, David Winter. I hope you enjoyed checking out this Roland V-Synth. As you can hear, it's pretty powerful and it's still a very valid, cool synthesizer. I'm Roland Pettis for the Alamo Music Sound Lab channel here on YouTube. Hop online, check us out, alamomusic.com, and feel free to reach out with any questions you might have. I'm here for you.